I came home on Christmas Eve, as snow was gently falling and the warm yellow lights on the porch flickered like a scene from some holiday movie. Only difference was, I no longer felt like I belonged in that movie. The old wooden door creaked as I pushed it open, and warmth from the fireplace spilled out, mixed with the scent of cinnamon and gingerbread cookies my mom always baked during the holidays. But it was all just a facade. I knew that the moment my eyes landed on the photo hanging on the wall. It was right above the fireplace. Mahogany frame, glossy print, carefully placed like a prized keepsake. And in it was my family, the three of them. My mom in her favorite ivory knit sweater, standing close beside my dad with his polite smile, and in the middle, my younger brother, Ryan, pulling a goofy face like he always did. I stared at the picture for a few seconds, the chill cutting through my coat. Because I wasn't in it, not hidden, not standing behind someone, I simply wasn't there. There was no sloppiness in this photo. It wasn't a quick snapshot or a badly cropped frame. It was a deliberately taken and edited picture, printed large and displayed proudly in the most important room of the house. A conscious decision. As if I had never existed. As if I were an unwanted memory they deleted with a single click. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat, then stepped into the living room like nothing had happened. My mom called out from the kitchen, her voice gentle like everything was perfectly normal. "Catherine, you're here. I'm making that chicken stew you love." Her tone didn't waver. Not a single question about my flight, not a word about the weather or the months I'd been away. No explanation for what I'd just seen, for being erased from the shared memory of this family. I hung my coat on the hook, brushed the snow from my boots, and told myself I was imagining things, that maybe it was just a temporary photo. But my mind wasn't that easy to fool. Ryan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, nodding slightly in my direction. "You're here. Thought you weren't coming." I gave a half smile and sat across from him. "Yeah, I used to think that too." On the table were neatly wrapped presents, handwritten tags, shiny ribbons, each with a name. Dad's, Mom's, Ryan's, but not mine. I glanced at the tree, decorated as carefully as every year, except the handmade ornaments I'd crafted as a kid were gone. The glass baubles with names etched on them, the glittery wreaths I'd glued together, all vanished, as if I'd never left a mark. Mom stepped out with her apron dusted in flour, her face glowing. "Dinner's almost ready. Is everyone hungry?" I looked at her, trying to read any hint of guilt in her eyes. But there was none. She was still smiling, still gentle, as if there was nothing worth mentioning. "Mom," I started, but then stopped. I had planned to ask about the photo, but suddenly I felt foolish. I already knew the answer. A forced chuckle. A "don't be so sensitive." An excuse like, "no one meant anything by it." And I didn't have the strength to hear that anymore. My dad came down the stairs, holding a glass of wine, his voice even. "Catherine, you look good. What have you been up to?" Not "how are you?" Not "I missed you." Just a casual question, like he was chatting with a neighbor. "Thanks, I've been managing," I replied, then walked into the kitchen, where heat from the oven filled the room. The food smelled amazing, everything perfectly prepared, only I no longer had an appetite. It didn't feel like home anymore. Dinner played out like a performance. Everyone stayed in character. Mom asked Ryan about his internship at the ad agency. Dad talked about his upcoming golf tournament, and me, I just sat there, an unwilling audience. No one asked about my new job. No one asked why I moved cities. No one cared if I was still with my ex. Every word at the table felt like a tiny needle, subtle, but enough to remind me I was just a stranger here for the occasion. When Ryan opened his gift from our parents, an expensive smartwatch, I tried not to react. As for me, at the end of the meal, I received a pair of wool socks and a card that read, "Merry Christmas to my strong daughter." I smiled faintly, not because I was happy, but because I had stopped expecting. After dinner, Mom told me I'd be sleeping in the guest room. Not my old room, the one with photo-covered walls and daisy print sheets I adored. That room was now storage, replaced by a foreign bed and a flickering nightlight. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wrapped in my scarf. Then I pulled from my coat pocket a thick cream envelope, the recipient's name printed in delicate handwriting. I'd prepared it weeks ago, unsure when to hand it over. The moment I saw the photo above the fireplace, all hesitation disappeared. I didn't need to raise my voice, didn't need an explanation. I just needed the truth to be where it belonged. That night, I lay there listening to the wind howling through the window and the soft footsteps of someone heading to the kitchen for water. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I had waited, for a real hug, for a sincere question, for a simple recognition. But even now, all I have is an empty space in the family photo, and an envelope holding something they can't deny one more time. On Christmas morning, I woke to the smell of waffles and the sound of music playing from the small speaker in the kitchen. Let It Snow played softly through the closed door, mixed with Mom's laughter and the scraping of chairs on the wooden floor. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, then reached for the envelope still tucked in the pocket of my coat, hanging at the head of the bed. The paper was still smooth under my fingers, as intact as the resolve I had felt the night before. When I stepped into the kitchen, everything was in place like a photo shoot ready for a magazine. The table was covered with a red and white checkered cloth, candles were lit, and a tray of cinnamon rolls sat in the center like an essential showpiece. Mom was plating scrambled eggs, her hair in a neat bun, lips painted coral. She looked so cheerful, like nothing strange had happened the night before. "Good morning, sweetheart. Hope you slept well," Mom said without turning around. "The living room was a bit cold," I replied, then poured myself a cup of coffee. Dad was already at the table, focused on his phone, and only nodded as I pulled out a chair. Ryan was talking about his new job in Austin, where he'd just been hired as an interior designer for a restaurant chain. My brother had the tone of someone used to being listened to, steady voice, well-timed pauses, confident eyes. "And I'll be flying to Tokyo in February. They're opening a new branch, and they want me to help with the Zen-inspired LED lighting concept." "That's amazing," Mom said, eyes lighting up. "I always knew you had a creative touch. Remember when you repainted the bathroom at 13? No one in the family has dared change that wall color since." Everyone laughed. I smiled along, but it felt like I was smiling in someone else's photo. Forced. Out of place. "Catherine, are you planning to switch jobs?" my dad asked, eyes still on his screen. "I already did, back in September. I'm working as an operations manager for a logistics firm in Denver." "Oh, right, Denver." No one followed up. No comments, no congratulations, no compliments, not a single glance in my direction. Just a silence that quickly got filled by Ryan continuing his story about a showroom design project in Manhattan. When the gifts were brought out, I stayed seated, knowing exactly how things would unfold, just like every other year. Ryan opened Mom's present first. Inside was a Tag Heuer watch with a brown leather strap and a blue dial, clearly a collector's edition. "Oh wow, Mom, Dad, this is the limited edition." Mom clasped her hands together, eyes sparkling like she'd just performed magic. "We knew you loved that model since last year, so your dad ordered it back in June." My dad smiled and patted Ryan's shoulder like he'd just closed a big deal. As for me, I got a mug, white with black letters. "Special daughter, who else could it be?" I turned the mug in my hands, my finger running over the words like brushing against an old joke. Mom said, lightly, "I thought it was cute. It made me think of you right away." I smiled, but all I felt inside was emptiness. I used to try to understand them, told myself maybe they just didn't know how to show affection. But the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't that they didn't know how, they just didn't want to give it to me. I remembered when I was 17. I got invited to a summer internship program at a research institute in New Jersey. I was so excited to tell my parents, thinking they'd be proud. But Mom just asked, "Can you wait until next year? Your brother needs me to take him to weekend art classes." So I didn't go. A year later, Ryan got an art scholarship to UCLA, and the whole family threw a big outdoor party. Applause, lights, a 3-tier cake. When I got my acceptance letter from the state business school, I got a quick hug from Dad, and a reminder. Make sure you save your money. I used to think I was stronger than Ryan. I got by on part-time jobs, from working at supermarket counters to handing out flyers at fairs. Once, I couldn't afford a textbook, so I hand-wrote all the lecture notes on loose paper and took photos of the library copy with my old phone. I never blamed anyone for it. I just wished someone had asked, "Do you need help?" When I got sick in my final year of college, had a high fever for 3 days, barely strong enough to get medicine, I called Mom. She answered, said she was at Ryan's art exhibit, and asked if I could wait until the weekend. I hung up and for the first time felt both empty and oddly free inside. That's when I began learning to live without them. Without encouragement, without gifts, without recognition. But knowing is one thing. Living with it is another. Watching Ryan beam over his new watch, I wasn't angry at him. I just saw more clearly where I stood. Always on the edge, just enough not to be forgotten entirely, but never enough to be fully kept. Breakfast ended with laughter. I washed my mug, placed it upside down on the drying rack, then quietly grabbed my coat from the living room. The envelope was still in the pocket. I planned to hold on to it until noon, after all the gifts had been opened, after everyone finished playing their roles. But something in me had shifted. The photo above the fireplace, the expensive watch, the mug with its loaded message, it all piled up, pushing me toward a limit I had touched too many times before. I pulled out the envelope and placed it on the table next to a bowl of untouched strawberries. No one noticed. I sat back, waiting for the moment when everything would change. Not because I caused a scene, but because for the first time I was making them face the truth. I'll never forget that day. A crisp September morning, slightly chilly, when I stopped by the Fremont County Administrative Office, just to request a copy of my residency certificate for a new job application. It was a simple, routine errand, nothing special. But I never expected that one document would open a door that had been locked tight for nearly a decade. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and reading glasses on a chain, looked at her screen, then tilted her head and asked me, "You're Catherine Moore, born July 18, 1992, correct?" I nodded. "So, you're still listed as the property owner at 2185 Brookfield Street." I froze. "Sorry, what?" "2185 Brookfield, the triplex near Creekside Park," she said in a steady tone like she was reading off a daily list. "That property's been under your name since 2016, transferred from Mr. Edward Moore. Edward Moore was my grandfather. He passed away 8 years ago." I thanked her and left the counter feeling like someone had just spoken to me in a foreign language. I didn't own a house. I had never been notified of any inheritance. No one had ever mentioned my grandfather leaving anything to me. For the entire week after, I lived like a ghost. I went to work, smiled, laughed as usual. But at night, I started digging. Searching public records, emailing the property archive office, and hiring a lawyer to help comb through any legal documents tied to Edward Moore. And layer by layer, the truth came out. My grandfather had left behind a legal, notarized will, clear and binding, in which he wrote, "I leave full ownership of the property at 2185 Brookfield Street to my granddaughter, Catherine Moore. No conditions. No intermediaries." But I had never seen that will. Because right after he passed, my father, Robert Moore, handled all the paperwork for the family. He told me my grandfather left a small amount of cash for funeral expenses and a few keepsakes he wanted us to hold on to. I never questioned it. It wasn't until I reviewed the tax records that I realized my parents' names kept appearing in income reports from renting out the 3 units in that house. They had been quietly collecting rent, renovating, even raising prices for 7 years, operating as property managers without any legal right. Meanwhile, I The sole legal heir had been completely shut out. I remember sitting for hours in front of my computer, hands trembling as I read each detail. While I was borrowing money to pay for dorm fees, eating cold sandwiches to save for the next semester, my parents were using property in my name to fund Ryan's private university tuition, throw outdoor birthday parties, and take spring vacations to Florida. Once the initial shock wore off, I felt strangely calm. No more sudden anger like all the times I'd been overlooked before. Just a cold, steady clarity. I knew what I needed to do. I hired a lawyer to prepare a full set of documents. Certified copies of the will, evidence from property records, bank statements, and letters from the rental office. A nearly 1-inch thick file, neatly sealed in a cream envelope stamped with a red legal seal. I'd kept it in my coat pocket since early December, carrying it around like it was the only thing holding me together through these artificial family dinners. I wasn't planning to explode. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation in the living room. I just wanted them to know that I knew. That this time, I wasn't the compliant daughter, waiting patiently for an explanation that would never come. I remembered the last time I mentioned Grandpa. It was on my 25th birthday, when I quietly brought cake to his grave and sat there for hours, telling him about my job and how I'd moved to Portland. When I told Mom about it, she just nodded and said Ryan was also thinking about moving there because the street art scene in Portland really suits his energy. Not a single word about the fact that I'd been living there for 2 years. Funny thing is, I'd forgotten about that house too. Grandpa used to say he'd renovate it after retirement, turn it into a place where lonely seniors could rent at a fair price. I thought he had sold it long ago. I never asked again, because I wasn't used to expecting anything from this family. Now I understand. Some things you don't need to ask for, because they were yours all along. On Christmas night, I placed the envelope on the dining table, amid torn wrapping paper and half-finished wine glasses. No one noticed. No one asked. They were too busy chatting, tossing hollow praise at Ryan and his plans to open his own gallery. I sat there silently, my hand resting on the rim of that special daughter mug. And this time, I truly believed the words. I was special because I was the only one in that room who carried the truth. And I was about to make them taste it. Every line, every word, no accusations, no tears, just black and white facts and a Christmas smile. I was ready. I sat quietly at the corner of the table, sipping lukewarm coffee from the mug that read, "Special Daughter." Around me, Christmas carried on exactly as scripted. Mom added more cookies to a plate, Dad played soft classical music from the Bluetooth speaker, and Ryan laughed loudly as he unwrapped another present. A pair of next-gen noise-canceling headphones, the same model he'd mentioned during an interview. The cream-colored envelope still lay untouched on the table, surrounded by wrapping paper, red ribbons, and crumbs. No one noticed it, at least not until my mom picked it up with a curious look. "What's this?" she asked, her voice still light, as if she were asking about dessert. I looked up, completely unfazed. "From me." My dad raised an eyebrow, pausing mid-tie on the last bow of Ryan's gift. "You didn't have to get us anything. Just having you here is enough." I set my mug down and said evenly, "I know, but this time, I wanted to." The air paused for just a beat, just enough for me to feel that everything was about to shift. My mom sat down, turned the envelope over in her hands, and looked to my dad as if waiting for a signal. He gave a small nod, and she began to open it. The rustling paper echoed in a room that was already too quiet. My dad leaned over her shoulder to read along. Ryan was still organizing wrapping paper, but I knew his eyes were about to shift. About 20 seconds passed. I hadn't taken my eyes off my parents. My mom's face began to lose color gradually, and my dad furrowed his brow, sweat beginning to form at the tip of his nose. "What is this?" my mom asked, her voice lower now. The lightness was gone. I answered slowly and clearly, like reading a line from a contract. That's A copy of Grandpa's will. It states clearly that he left the house on Brookfield Street to me, directly, without conditions or intermediaries. My mom blinked rapidly and my dad placed the papers down as if they'd burned his hands. Ryan looked up, confused. Wait, what house? I turned to Ryan, calm as ever. The house you used for your creative lifestyle photo shoot in last fall's campaign? Ryan's face hardened. You mean… Yes, I cut in. That house was a gift from Grandpa to me, but for the past 7 years, Mom and Dad have been secretly renting it out, collecting money and treating it like their own. My dad shot up from his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. Catherine, this isn't… It's not what you think. I did? I didn't respond. I simply pulled out a confirmation letter from the property registry and a letter from the attorney, placing them on the table. It's all here. Title transfer records, rental income statements, bank records, everything's clear. I didn't come here to argue, I came to inform. My mom stayed seated, her mouth slightly open as if searching for words, but finally all that came out was a sigh. We didn't mean to, Catherine. Things were complicated back then. You were in school. You couldn't manage a property. Your father just wanted to keep things steady. I leaned forward slightly for the first time. No one asked me. No one told me. No one let me decide what to do with my own inheritance. And all that time, I was borrowing money, eating instant noodles, juggling 3 jobs just to stay afloat, while you used my money to vacation in Palm Springs. My dad raised a hand, trying to calm things down. You were always strong. You didn't need… It's that kind of thinking that left me behind, I said, my voice low. Being strong doesn't mean being used. Not needing help doesn't mean I deserved to be forgotten. Ryan stood up, hands on his hips. Oh, I didn't know anything about this. You didn't need to. You just got to enjoy it. Silence flooded the room like a thick wave. My mom looked up, eyes glassy but dry. So what are you going to do? I already did. The house is officially back under my name. All lease agreements have been updated. Starting next month, rent will be deposited directly into my account. You no longer have access… My dad frowned. By doing this, you're destroying everything we built. I laughed, softly but clearly. No, Dad, I'm just taking back what's mine. My mom reached out, her voice hurried. But you can't do this to your family. I looked her straight in the eye. Family? You haven't been mine for a long time. I stood up, put on my coat, while the background Christmas music kept playing awkwardly behind me. Ryan called out, You think you're better than us now? I turned back, gave a faint smile. No, Ryan, I just know I'm not beneath you anymore. I walked out of that house without looking back, without needing to say anything else. The snow was falling light as mist, not heavy, not denying. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. Clean, sharp, real. I knew, from that moment on, I was no longer hidden. No longer the faded figure in old photographs. No longer the one living on the edge of family memory. I was the one standing in the center of my own story, in the center of the house that bears my name, in the center of the truth. And this time, I wasn't running from it. 2 weeks after Christmas, I got the first message. It came at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was making coffee in the small kitchen of my apartment in Denver. My phone lit up. From Mom. Sweetheart, your father and I just got a notice from the bank. We need to talk. Urgently. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd learned to listen to silence more than any explanation. 7 years of silence from them couldn't be undone by 3 broken lines in a text message. The second message came that afternoon, from a number I hadn't saved but still recognized by the way it was written. I know you're angry, but can we sit down and talk like adults? You don't want this to tear the whole family apart. This time, I chuckled. Like adults? Adults don't alter wills behind their daughter's back. Adults don't use their daughter's property to fund vacations for the chosen child. I turned off notifications. By the end of January, I heard from an old friend who lived near the condo where my parents had been staying. She sent me a photo. The unit they once lived in had a handwritten, "For sale by owner" sign taped to a piece of white cardboard. A week later, I saw the listing pop up on a local classified site. The description read, "No agent, must sell quickly due to personal financial matters." That condo had once been what my mom called our second nest, where she hung her favorite landscape paintings and told Ryan, "Someday you can use this as your creative office." Now, they were being forced to sell it. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't feel guilty either. I knew without the rental income from the Brookfield house, they couldn't keep both places going. I also knew that during all those years, they had no stable income. My dad had retired from engineering 3 years ago, and Mom only worked a few part-time shifts at a nearby flower shop. They'd been living entirely off rent money, from property they kept hidden from me. And Ryan? One evening in mid-February, while I was reading, my phone lit up again. From Ryan. I got kicked out of the studio. They said I'd been late on rent. "Mom says you won't help. Are you seriously going to ignore this?" I lock the screen. Ryan had once bragged about that studio at a year-end party in Los Angeles, said it was an open space for creative freedom, untouched by finances or responsibility. Maybe now he finally understood that even freedom needs to be sustained by truth and integrity. About a week later, I heard through friends that Ryan had moved back in with our parents. They were now all sharing the old house in the suburbs of Fremont. The same one my mom once called, "too small for big dreams." That house had once been where I slept on the sofa during holiday visits. Now they had no other choice. I still lived my own life. Waking up early, working at the logistics company, coming home in the evenings to read, sometimes watering my plants or walking the dog I recently adopted around the park. I no longer had to prove my worth. No longer needed to build a story to make someone proud. I just lived, peacefully, in the house on Brookfield. I officially took over ownership and re-signed the lease agreements for the 3 families living there. When I announced a 10% rent reduction below market rate, one of the tenants burst into tears. The woman on the ground floor hugged me tightly and whispered that I was the first landlord who made them feel seen as a human being. That moment was worth more than any gift I had ever waited for from my parents. The final message came one afternoon in March, accompanied by a long email. This time, it was from my mother. "Catherine, I know you're angry, but you can't let this one thing ruin everything. We're family. Ryan is really struggling. Your father hasn't slept in a month. I know I was wrong, but please, think it over. Families shouldn't fall apart over one house." I read that line and stopped. One house? I remembered all the nights I slept in that damp, drafty dorm room, too broke to buy a new blanket. All the times I had to choose between buying a textbook or filling my gas tank. All the months I forced myself to reject phone calls because I knew they couldn't, or rather wouldn't, help. And now, when I'm no longer a resource they can quietly drain, they call it one little thing, just a house. I closed the email. I didn't respond. I didn't need to scream. Didn't need to defend or argue. My silence was the clearest answer I could give. I had started learning how to enjoy silence, not the silence of being forgotten, but the quiet of someone finally living in alignment with their own worth. I didn't hope they would understand. I only hoped they would stop. And if they couldn't, I wasn't there to listen anymore. One Sunday afternoon, sitting in the backyard of the Brookfield house, I watched sunlight filtering through the leaves and thought, maybe this is what I really inherited from my grandfather. Not a house, but the right to choose my own life. That spring arrived earlier than usual. The maple tree in front of the Brookfield house started to bud by late March, and I spent each weekend standing in the backyard, shovel in hand, sometimes just feeling the earth beneath me like a quiet reminder. I truly belonged here. I hired a local crew to repair the roof, replace the rotted wooden window frames, and repaint the white fence that framed the small front yard. Nothing fancy. I just wanted the place to be a calm, simple space, free from lies and sidelong glances. A real home. The ground floor remained as is, with 3 rental units. I lived on the second floor, in the room my grandfather once used as his reading nook. That room had a large window facing the park, where every morning I could hear sparrows chirping and watch sunlight spill onto the white linen curtains. I bought a navy blue armchair, identical to the one Grandpa used to have. I placed it in the corner, beside a small bookshelf and a brass reading lamp. In the evenings, I sat there sipping tea, reading, journaling, and not once did anyone call my name, just to ask about Ryan. One Saturday, I asked my close friend Elise to take a picture of me. Not some formal portrait, just me, standing in front of the house, wearing an old khaki coat, holding a ring of keys, with the freshly painted mahogany door behind me. No one else in the frame, no one standing beside me. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I printed the photo, placed it in a dark wood frame, and hung it in the hallway outside my bedroom. Every time I walked by, I remembered that moment, holding those keys, and how it felt like holding my life with both hands. I no longer checked my phone constantly, no longer woke in the middle of the night because of messages from my mother. No longer waited for an explanation letter or an apology, strong enough to patch over the cracked years. I wasn't angry anymore, truly. The anger that once burned in my chest on long nights had cooled, like ashes after a fire. Now I just felt quiet. As if, after everything, peace was the one thing that most confirmed I had survived, and more than that I had lived. Right. One drizzly afternoon, I was walking around the neighborhood when I ran into Mrs. Simmons, the elderly neighbor who lived 2 doors down. She walked over slowly, carrying a bouquet of wild daisies. "You must be Catherine Moore, right?" she asked, recognition in her eyes. "Yes, I am," I replied, smiling. I used to know Edward Moore, a good man. He'd lend me his car sometimes when I needed to bring things home from the market. "This house, it's yours now?" I nodded. She handed me the flowers, a simple and kind gesture. "He'd be so proud of you. You've brought this place back to life." I held the bouquet, feeling my heart ease, as if someone had gently soothed it. Not everyone knew the full story, but that didn't matter. What mattered was I no longer had to prove anything. Since moving to Brookfield, I started writing down the things I used to overlook. Not as a memoir or anything grand, just small entries. Today it rained lightly, I finished a good book, one of the tenants left a thank you note for fixing the washer on time. Little things, but real. The kind of feeling I never had while living in Ryan's shadow, and the weight of invisible expectation. One day, while watering plants on the back porch, I received a card. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting right away. It was my mother's. Inside was an old photo. It was me and Grandpa standing side by side at the wooden table in the backyard when I was 12. His hand rested on my shoulder. We were both smiling. Below the photo was a short message. "We didn't know how to hold on to you. I hope you hold on to yourself. Mom." No apology, no explanation, no more blame. But I didn't feel hurt anymore. I folded the card and placed it in the drawer of my writing desk, next to the letter Grandpa wrote me when I graduated high school. I didn't need promises from the past. I just needed to protect the present. That summer, I invited a few friends over for dinner. Friends who had stood by me even without knowing the whole story. We had BBQ in the backyard, strung fairy lights in the maple tree, and played soft jazz. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed that much. One of them, Marcus, a photographer, pointed to the house and said, "This place has really good energy. Not like fancy home good, but the kind that makes you want to stay." I nodded, my eyes drifting toward the porch where the lights shimmered against fresh green leaves. Because it doesn't ask anyone to pretend. I was no longer the child sitting at the edge of the table, hoping someone would ask, "Are you okay?" I was no longer the girl staring silently at a family photo missing one face. Now I was the only one in the frame, and I was enough. No explanations needed, no forgiveness required, no need to be remembered by those who once tried to erase me from their story, because in the end, I rewrote mine. Line by line, with truth, with resilience, and with an unconditional love I gave to myself. I am Catherine Moore, and for the first time in my life, I don't need to remind anyone of that. From my own story, I've realized that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is walk away from places that no longer love us, not to get even, but to reclaim our worth. I no longer wait for validation from those who forgot me. Instead, I've learned to live truthfully, rebuild from the pieces, and turn them into something steady. In this life, even if no one gives me what I deserve, I can still give it to myself. What do you think about Catherine's story? If it were you, would you have done anything differently? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, meaningful stories about life and family in upcoming videos. I am Zoe, now 24 years old. But this story starts when I was just 12. Back then, I lived in a family that wasn't too wealthy, but we didn't lack for anything either. My family had enough to live comfortably. Not luxurious, but enough to not worry about money on a daily basis. My dad, Jack, was a hardworking man, always engaged in jobs that were never stable. My mom, Margaret, was a strong woman who managed everything at home. Life seemed calm, but there was always something that made me feel like I was a small part of that family picture. Although I wasn't a bad kid or doing anything terribly wrong, every time I saw how much attention my parents gave to my younger sister, Lucy, I felt forgotten. Lucy was the golden child, the perfect daughter that everyone praised. Her teachers always regarded her as outstanding, and every accomplishment came so easily to her. And my parents? They couldn't stop bragging about Lucy. They flaunted her like she was a gift from heaven, while I was just Zoe, the ordinary daughter. Nothing special. Every time my dad told everyone about Lucy's accomplishments, about the beautiful paintings she made or the songs she sang, everything seemed perfect. As for me, a little praise like "Zoe did pretty well" was all I got. I didn't blame Lucy. She was just a kid, doing what she was supposed to do. But the invisible comparison between us made me feel like I was the shadow of this family. One afternoon, as I sat on the old sofa in the living room, gazing out the window at the garden, Mom called me downstairs. This time, her voice wasn't as friendly as usual. Something felt off. She told me to come to the living room, and I knew something was wrong. When I walked in, both Mom and Dad were sitting quietly on the sofa. Mom looked at me with a worried expression, but I didn't feel the warmth I usually did. "Zoe, we need to talk," Mom said, her voice trying to sound calm, but I could feel the tension in the air. "What is it, Mom?" I asked, anxiety rising in my chest. Dad looked at me, his eyes no longer filled with the familiar care. "We're facing financial difficulties, Zoe, and we can't afford to take care of you anymore," he said, his voice dry like a final declaration. I froze, unable to comprehend what I had just heard. What? What do you mean? I couldn't believe my ears. It felt like the world was falling apart in front of me. How could they say that? How could a 12-year-old like me be treated this way? Mom continued, but her words became a blur in my mind. "We've decided to send you to a foster home. Everything will be fine, Zoe. It's just temporary," Mom said. But the word temporary felt like a thorn in my heart, making the pain sharper. My voice caught in my throat. Why not Lucy? Why me? I was stunned. "Lucy needs stability, Zoe. Your sister can't live in these conditions," Mom replied, her tone cold and heartbreaking. I felt like I had been completely abandoned. Not just neglected, but abandoned. As if it was all premeditated. How could I even understand what my parents had just said? They hadn't just left me, they were telling me that I was a burden they couldn't continue to carry. Dad's words were like nails hammered into my head, unshakable. After that day, I wasn't the Zoe I used to be. What happened was such a shock that I lost my way. While everything continued around me, I felt like I had been left behind, no longer a part of this family. When my parents dropped me off at the foster home, I didn't know what to do except sit quietly in the car. My heart filled with sadness and confusion. The foster home was not big, but it was cozy enough. My foster mom, Mrs. Miller, was gentle and always tried to make me feel comfortable. She made warm breakfasts, and the smell of pancakes was more comforting than I had ever imagined. But no matter what, I couldn't get used to this place. I couldn't accept living away from my family, especially after discovering that I had been left here because of financial reasons, while Lucy stayed with my parents. The days that followed passed slowly. The feeling of abandonment grew stronger, painful, and unhealable. I tried not to think too much about it, but it was hard. Every time I saw pictures of my old family on my phone, with Lucy always in the pictures of their travels with my parents, I felt like a ghost. Why did they treat me this way? Why not Lucy? In the early days at the foster home, I always felt out of place. Even though the Miller family tried hard to make me feel comfortable, I couldn't fully trust them. Mrs. Miller always wore a friendly smile, made warm breakfasts, and tried to create a family-like atmosphere. Mr. Miller would sometimes come into my room, talking about books he loved, but I couldn't open up. They were too different from my parents. The people I had loved and trusted unconditionally. No matter how kind Mrs. Miller was, I still couldn't forget the feeling of being abandoned, of being replaced. I still held on to the belief that everything was just temporary. My parents would come back. They were just gone for a little while, and then I would be back with my family. I kept imagining that after a few days they would call me, tell me everything was fine and I would be back home. But day after day, no call, no message. In the early days here, I spent most of my time thinking about my family, reminiscing about old moments. I remember every morning my dad would make coffee and place a cup beside me, while my mom would prepare breakfast with her silent love. I also remember the evenings when the whole family would gather together, chatting about the day, sharing laughs. But now, all of that is nothing but distant, fading memories. Slowly, what I had hoped for began to feel more and more out of reach. I started wondering whether my parents would truly come back. They had left me behind, and while part of me still held on to hope, I knew that hope was gradually fading. Sitting alone in the living room, my tired eyes staring at the empty wall in front of me, I realized they hadn't called. No messages, no phone calls. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't keep the belief that they would return. Everything seemed too quiet, too cold. Mrs. Miller entered the room and sat beside me. "Zoe, are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle yet full of concern. I didn't want to show my emotions, but she could see just how exhausted I looked. "I'm fine," I answered, forcing a smile, but that smile couldn't hide the sorrow in my heart. Mrs. Miller watched me for a moment before speaking again. "You know, sometimes life doesn't go the way we plan, but you're here not because you did anything wrong. You don't deserve what happened." Her words choked me up. I knew she meant well, but her words only made me realize that things would never go back to the way they were. I couldn't go back home, and maybe my parents would never come for me. Though I gradually adapted to life here, there were still moments when I missed home so much it hurt. I often thought about my parents, about the old family. I missed the days when I felt like I was part of the family, when I mattered. I couldn't forget the feeling of being left behind, forgotten. However, a part of me knew that no matter how many days passed, I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to learn to accept and move on. After all, life must go on, right? One morning, while I was sitting in the Miller's dining room, Mrs. Miller looked at me with a gentle gaze. "Zoe, If you want, you can call your parents. I don't want you to feel cut off from everything, she said, her voice soft but full of understanding. I felt a little emotional hearing her say that, but I couldn't call them. Maybe my parents needed me, but I couldn't keep living with the hopeless expectation that they would return. I didn't need to chase the past or wait for a call that I didn't know would ever come. I got involved in school activities, finding joy in the little things like helping my classmates or simply joining the debate club, where I could immerse myself in conversations full of logic without worrying about things beyond my control. I was no longer the Zoe of before, the lonely girl always waiting for her parents to return. Now, every day, I felt the change in how I viewed the world. As summer approached, I began to receive new opportunities. A part-time job at a bookstore taught me not only how to earn money, but also how to manage my life and personal finances. Small but steady steps. One afternoon, while I was tidying up at the bookstore counter, my phone rang. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it, and it was a simple message from my mom. "We should talk. Can you call me?" But I didn't reply right away. Instead, I put the phone down, gazing out the window where the last rays of sunlight drifted by. Inside me, there was no more waiting or longing. That feeling had faded with every day I moved forward. I stood up, walked toward the door, and continued with my work. One weekend, as I sat alone in my room at the Miller house, I suddenly remembered that I hadn't checked my social media in a while. I wasn't the type to post often, but in moments of free time, I would open my phone and scroll through old posts. That day, I couldn't explain why I did it. Maybe it was because I wanted to forget the emptiness. Or maybe I just thought I needed some connection to the outside world. But then, I realized something I never wanted to see. A new post appeared on my dad's profile. The whole family was standing on a beach, golden sunlight, the ocean cool and blue. They were all smiling, as if everything was fine. Lucy stood in the center, her face beaming, like a testament to a perfect family. I couldn't take my eyes off the picture. Even though I wasn't in it, I knew they were living a life that I was no longer a part of. The caption beneath the photo hit me like a dagger. "Dream life, we've finally found peace." Peace? I couldn't understand. How could they talk about peace when they had abandoned me? How could they live a dream life while leaving me in the dark? Reading those words, I couldn't hold back the anger rising inside me. Every photo they posted, every comment they made, all reminded me that I had been cast out of their life. The feeling of abandonment, of being forgotten, surged within me. But it wasn't just pain. It was anger that couldn't be soothed. I couldn't understand how they could live like that, without contacting me, without a word of concern. They were traveling, living their perfect life without me by their side. How could they treat me this way? I scrolled through more photos. A trip to a luxury resort, a lavish dinner under candlelight, smiles everywhere. But with each photo, I felt more lost than ever. I had once been a part of their life. I had once been someone they loved and cared for. But now, I was nothing but a memory, a ghost they had forgotten. My heart was boiling, but all I could do was stare at the screen. The anger and disappointment impossible to extinguish. I couldn't understand them anymore. How could they smile, be happy, while I was struggling with this pain? How could they abandon me and leave me to face everything on my own? A moment later, as my head was spinning, I realized that I needed to do something to break free from this feeling. I couldn't just sit here, staring at their perfect life while all I could feel was pain. I had to stand up. I had to do something to regain control over my life. With a single tap, I deleted all those photos, erased all the messages, the captions I didn't want to see anymore. I didn't need to look at their life. They had chosen to live that way, and I was going to choose to live for myself. I reopened my social media page and posted a simple status. I've learned to live without anyone's approval, and I will continue my journey. After I severed all ties with the past, life at the Millers gradually became an integral part of my journey. Though at first I kept my distance, unable to fully open up, the sincerity of the Miller family gradually changed me. They never forced me to forget the past, but they were always there for me, ready to help when I needed it. Mrs. Miller continued to be the caregiver, always looking out for me with every meal, every restful night. Mr. Miller, though not always the easiest to share his emotions, always had short yet encouraging words when I needed support. His gentle guidance in tough times, teaching me the value of hard work and patience, made me realize I was no longer alone. Each morning, when I woke up and saw Mrs. Miller preparing breakfast, I felt a part of my heart healing. Not because of the food she cooked, but because of the care she showed. I knew that, even though she wasn't my biological mother, she treated me like I was her own daughter. Gradually, I opened up more to the Miller family. In the evenings, we would often sit together in the living room, watching TV or simply chatting about the day. While at times I still felt out of place, their warmth and kindness gradually made me feel more at ease. They didn't just stop at taking care of me materially, but they also helped me grow as a person. Mr. Miller encouraged me to get involved in school activities, starting with the debate club. At first, I only did it because he suggested it, but gradually I realized I really enjoyed it. I began to find joy in debating, in using my reasoning to persuade others. And from there, I started to realize that I could be stronger than I thought. Mrs. Miller also encouraged me to focus more on my studies, constantly reminding me that nothing could stop me from moving forward if I tried hard enough. I began to see progress in my academics, from low test scores to steadily higher grades over time. They never asked me to be perfect, but they always made me feel like I was valuable, that I deserved love and respect. With the support of the Miller family, I not only focused on my studies, but also started looking for a part-time job to become financially independent. This didn't just help me feel more confident, but it also taught me how to manage money and responsibility. Every month, receiving my paycheck from the small bookstore in the neighborhood, I felt a sense of pride. I wasn't the Zoe I once was, the girl who only relied on others to survive. Now, I knew I could stand on my own. Moreover, those afternoons I worked, when I started making new friends, I began to feel like I was rebuilding my life from scratch. While not everything was easy, at least I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The Miller family was always there, supporting me through the tough times. And even without my biological parents, I didn't feel lacking in affection. As I started to see my future more clearly, the nights I spent doing homework and planning for exams, I no longer feared being left behind. I knew I could create my own future, even though the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The important thing was that I had the Miller family by my side, and that made me believe I could achieve whatever I set my mind to. Finally, after endless efforts, I received some unexpected good news. I had been awarded a full scholarship to a prestigious university in the city. When I read the notification, I could hardly believe my eyes. This wasn't just the result of countless late nights studying, but also a long journey filled with hardships that I had overcome. I had been given an opportunity I'd never even dared to dream of before. On my first day at school, I felt a bit lost and anxious. Everything was new: professors, classmates, the way of learning, the living environment. But one thing I knew for sure was that I was no longer Zoe of the past. The girl who was always left behind, always feeling undeserving of anything. Now, I was a hopeful student, and I was confident that I would build my own future. With the full scholarship, I didn't have to worry about tuition fees, but college life was still not easy. I needed to work part-time to cover living expenses and start building financial independence. One day, after arriving at school, I decided to look for a part-time job. Not because I was lacking anything, but because I wanted to support myself, to prove that I could do it on my own. So, I started working at a small coffee shop near campus. The first few days were tough, but I learned a lot. Besides making coffee, I learned how to communicate with customers, manage my time, and handle emergencies. The job wasn't easy, but I enjoyed the feeling of independence and being able to earn money through my own hard work. During my first year, I joined several school clubs to make friends and develop soft skills. One of the clubs I joined was the debate club, where I could showcase my reasoning and persuasion skills. At first, I joined as a newbie, not daring to speak much. But gradually, I started feeling more confident in each debate. I realized that when facing challenges, I no longer backed down like I used to. To earn extra income, I also began tutoring a few local high school students. At first, I only tutored basic subjects, but as I saw my teaching skills improve, I started expanding and helped students prepare for important exams. These tutoring sessions not only provided extra income, but also helped me develop communication skills, patience, and the ability to convey knowledge. Thanks to my hard work and perseverance, I began achieving certain successes in both my studies and work. My academic results improved, and I received praise from professors, and even started participating in research projects. The tutoring work also helped me build more relationships and made me feel truly valued. The busy days of working and studying taught me many lessons about independence and responsibility. I couldn't forget the late-night study sessions when it was just me and the light from my desk lamp. During those moments, I always felt exhausted, but also proud. Every time I received a high grade on a test, I reminded myself that I was getting closer to my goal. Then, I was chosen to participate in an academic exchange program with a university in Europe. This was an opportunity I never imagined, but now I realize that without putting in the effort, I would never know my own limits. With these initial accomplishments, I began to trust my abilities. I was no longer Zoe from the past, always hesitating, always afraid. I had learned how to stand firm, take control of my life, and not let the past blur the path ahead. Although many challenges still lay ahead, I knew that I would continue moving forward, not only for myself, but also for those who believed in me and helped me. Like the Miller family. The day I received my college diploma was a day I had been waiting for a long time. After years of hard work, I finally stood on that stage, holding my degree in my hands, not only as the result of my academic efforts, but also as proof to myself that I could do it, that I was no longer the child left behind. It was the proudest moment of my life, and I didn't want anything or anyone to ruin that special day. As I stood among the crowd of friends and family, my eyes suddenly caught an image that made my heart stop. It was my parents. They were standing there beside a group of people, and when my mom saw me, she waved and called out. Both Lucy and I were surprised to see them appear after so many years of absence. I felt a deep internal conflict. It wasn't because I still loved them, but because their appearance marked the return of a past I had worked so hard to move on from. My mom walked up to me, her face sporting a fake smile. "Zoe, you did so well. We're so proud of you," she said in a soft voice, but I could barely hear those words. "We've always thought about you, you know." My dad also came over, patting me on the shoulder as if I were the good child he had never forgotten. I stood still, unable to respond. All I could feel was anger rising inside me. "Why are you here?" I couldn't hold back my emotions. My voice was quiet but tense. They kept smiling, but I could feel the awkwardness in their eyes. "We just want to reconnect, Zoe. After all, it's your special day." My mom tried to prolong the conversation, as if nothing significant had happened between us in all these years. "My special day?" I raised an eyebrow, my voice cold. "You left me without an explanation, and now you come to me? I haven't considered you as my family for a long time now." I didn't want to make a scene, but I couldn't stand by and let them ruin my day. Lucy, who had been standing nearby, looked at me for a moment before stepping forward, her voice firm. "Mom, Dad, we can't keep living in this lie. Zoe is no longer a child. She's grown, and she doesn't need you. You didn't just abandon her, you deceived her." Lucy's words were a shock to both me and my parents. Mrs. Miller, who was standing nearby, had a worried look on her face but seemed to understand the situation. My parents just looked at each other, their calm demeanor breaking. My mom tried to speak, but couldn't find the words to justify herself. "Sweetheart, we've done everything for the family. We just made some wrong decisions." Lucy didn't let them finish. "Don't talk about financial reasons. I know the truth. Mom, Dad, you didn't just abandon Zoe for money. You deceived her. You were living a lavish life, traveling and enjoying things Zoe could never have, while she had to fend for herself." The truth hit like a slap, leaving my parents unable to deny it any longer. All the explanations, the reasons they had given for so long, now meant nothing. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had been living a life I wasn't even aware of, not due to lack of money, but because they had chosen a different path. There was nothing more to say. My dad lowered his head, silent. My mom didn't say anything either, just looked down at the floor as if she couldn't face the words Lucy had just said. None of us spoke anymore. But I knew things had changed. Forever. In that moment, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt like a completely different person. Someone who had overcome the past. Someone who could stand up and speak the truth. No matter what my parents had to say, I had enough strength to no longer be affected by them. And on that day, I realized that family isn't about blood. It's about those who stand by you, protect you, and help you find yourself. Since that day, when I stepped out of the shadow of the past and found myself, my life had completely changed. I was no longer the scared girl, waiting for love and acceptance from those who had abandoned me. Instead, I became a confident, strong, and independent woman, knowing that I could build my own future without the help of those who didn't deserve it. With the experiences I had gone through, I began to feel the need to do something meaningful. Not just to help myself, but to help other young people facing difficulties like I had before. I decided to start a non-promised financial organization aimed at helping young people from struggling families learn personal financial management and build a solid financial foundation for the future. My organization wasn't just about teaching young people how to save, invest, or budget. It was also about helping them believe in themselves, knowing they could change their future. I held workshops, free classes, and invited financial experts to share their experiences. To my surprise, the number of young people joining kept growing, and I realized I was creating a small community where each person could share their story and learn from one another. Gradually, my organization became well-known and received support from influential people in the financial industry, and it grew stronger. Not only did it help financially, but I also created a space where participants could share their struggles, their challenges in life. From there, I realized that besides helping them master finance, I was also helping them find confidence in themselves. Every weekend, the Miller family would gather with me and close friends. We would sit together, talk about what we had accomplished, future plans, and the simple joys like cooking together. Those moments became precious in my life, when I truly felt like I had a place to belong. No longer feeling lonely or lacking, I felt free and happy because I had found my own path, a path I had drawn and followed. From a girl who had always suffered from abandonment, now I was someone who could create change, not just for myself, but for others as well. Today, when I look back at what I've accomplished, I don't feel proud of my achievements alone. What I'm most proud of is that I didn't let the past defeat me. I learned how to stand up, build my life, and more importantly, I learned how to love and accept myself. I don't know what the future will bring, but one thing I know for sure is that I will continue living this life with those who truly care and love me. And no matter what challenges lie ahead, I'll never have to face them alone. Because I've built a new family, and that's the family I need. One morning, while I was sitting in the office of the financial organization I founded, my phone suddenly buzzed. On the screen was my mom's name. I don't remember the last time I spoke with her, but her presence in my life no longer mattered as much as before. Still, I felt a small sense of anxiety. Logic told me not to listen, but my hands automatically reached for the phone. My mom's voice came through the phone, as if she were still the kind and loving mother I once knew, despite the many unhealed wounds between us. "Zoe, are you okay? Your dad and I are so proud of you. We've been watching you from afar and we see that you've accomplished so many wonderful things." Her words sounded sweet, but I knew nothing had really changed in them. "I'm fine, Mom." My voice was cold, though I couldn't deny the confusion rising inside me. "Thanks for keeping track." I didn't want to continue the conversation, but my mom kept speaking, her voice now tinged with hesitation. "Zoe, actually, we've been going through a huge struggle. We're in a very bad financial situation. Your dad and I thought maybe you could help us out a bit. Maybe help us pay off some of our debts, if you can." Her words were like a shock, a blow to my emotions. She not only called after so many years of silence, but also asked for my help. Help from the people who abandoned me when I needed them the most. I paused for a moment, trying to control my emotions. "Mom, I can't help you and Dad. I've made it clear to everyone that I won't stay in contact anymore. I can't live in that fake relationship. Why don't you stand up for yourselves like you and Dad chose for us in the past?" I said it, feeling like I had finally said everything that had been building up in me for years. At that moment, I didn't need to say anything else. I had made the decision to cut ties with them, not just because they left me, but because I didn't want them to continue using my pity to escape the consequences they had created. After that call, I received an email from my dad. Both of them sent the same apology, but this time not for abandoning me, but because of the financial situation they were facing. The whole email was about asking for money and hoping I could help them once again. The sweet words couldn't hide the truth that they only saw me as a tool to solve their problems. I didn't need to think long. I deleted both the email and their phone numbers from my contact list. I didn't want to carry those painful memories anymore. Love isn't something I can get back from them when they only returned for their own benefit. Forgiveness is not about conceding in every situation, especially when people don't change. Now, I understand that family isn't just about blood. Family is those who stand by you during tough times, those who believe in you and help you overcome challenges, not because they have to, but because they want to. My family now is the Miller family. The close friends who have been with me from the very beginning. They are the ones who always encourage me to move forward, not drag me back. Even though choosing not to respond to my parents' email or refuse their request for help might cause me to be criticized by others, I don't regret it. I've lived a life of freedom, not bound by those painful relationships. I've learned to love myself and build a life worthy of the efforts I've made. I look at the future without fear. My efforts are not just to help myself, but also to create an environment for young people like me, helping them gain confidence in their financial abilities and live a life not dependent on anyone else. Everything that happens has a reason, and now I know. I can stand on my own without any help from the people who never stood by me. Zoe has transformed from an abandoned, emotionally deprived girl into a strong, independent, and confident woman. Her life is no longer influenced by those who abandon her, but by those who truly care and love her. With a financial organization helping young people, Zoe not only built a solid career but also created a community where people help each other rise. She has learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about those who stand by you in times of difficulty. What do you think of Zoe's journey of determination and transformation? What would you do if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more touching and meaningful stories about family life in future videos.